so much for that very generous. Are you able to hear me in the back?
Yes.
Thank you so much for that very generous introduction. I don't get overwhelmed very easily, but today I am. And I've been through the facilities, and it was amazing how a jewel like this is sitting in the heart of Bombay and doing such important work and gathering so much prestige and eminence in such a quick time. So congratulations for what you have achieved, and I think a lot of credit goes to Shani. I don't know how many of you know, but I was a student. I was like one of you in Signal College about 30 years ago, and she taught secretarial practice, and she is as inspiring. So I was just asking her what the secret of her energy is, because I saw really no difference between the energy that was there at that time and the energy that we see today. So it's you are very lucky that you have her as your leader, and under her leadership I think you will do so much more. You are an inspiration. So thank you. And there's so many people in Bombay, so many of my friends, so many people who are now leading large companies who have at some point of time been taught by you. So thank you very much for what you are doing to India and for Indian society. So I'm going to just speak a few words about the Foundation for Everyday Ethics, which my wife and I we started. So this is what it's sort of obviously my identity is very closely associated with the firm, but I think we're doing a little bit of this on our own as well, and I guess the firm will support this. So our firm, as Ms. Shani said, we're the largest law firm in India, about 750 lawyers and over 400 non-lawyers. So we have all the functions. We started a design project. Can you believe lawyers also require a design project? So we're bringing in design thinking into our firm. We're actually working with the same consultant who designed your logo. Obviously as well, and I mean our lawyers are very fascinated by this. So I don't think you should think about the legal profession as something which is off bounds. On the contrary, I think the world has become so fused that all sorts of thinking really go into making every profession richer by the experience. So, but I'll talk about that another day. Now about our foundation for everyday ethics. So this began as a little bit of a spiritual journey for us about 2 years ago when our firm completed 100 years. The firm was actually founded by my grandfather. Cyril Amarchand was my grandfather who began the firm in 1917. And when you sort of achieve 100 years and you're also the kind of dominant firm in your space, you also get very introspective to wonder what is it that got us so far, because not too many firms, organizations last that long, and even if they last that long, they're not that relevant, they're not on the top. You can't be there for so long and at the top, and there was obviously some secret sauce that we had. And we figured after a process of distillation of thinking that the real process, the real secret sauce that we had was how we managed talent. And then we sort of distilled it down to devise our purpose statement, which was producing the finest lawyers for a just world. And there are many elements of this, finest lawyers, producing them, which is we started with our campus recruitment to India. We went to Indian law colleges and we built our entire firm from universities to places in our legal firm. But now the last bit, just world. So we are not just a producing factory. I think we had to have some relevance in society. And as we started exploring the theme on just world, the question of ethics came up, because we can't have a just world which doesn't have an ethical foundation. So sometime earlier this year, going back to 2017, we actually instituted a chair in some colleges for program for everyday ethics, but we struggled with the curriculum. And we struggle with the idea of explaining to people how everyday ethics is really about a DNA change, about a mindset, and it's not just about complying with the technical codes of conduct of the profession. Then last October when I was in Sydney, I heard Dr. Simon Longstaff and was very, very impressed with what I heard. And then we started off a process of bringing him to India, and this is that trip. In parallel, sometime in February this year, my wife and I, we set up our own philanthropic foundation for, it's called Foundation for Everyday Ethics. The idea is to mainstream the ethics conversation into society, where we will work with campuses, we will work with civil society, we will work with corporates, we will work with law enforcement agencies, because it's universal, cuts across everything, and take the conversation to them. So what have we done? This is day 3. On the first day, our first session was with the police force of Bombay. We had 150 very senior police officers starting right from the top in a room, and we carried the conversation of ethics to them. And I can tell you for sure, they were extremely attentive, very humble, and we should be proud of the police force that we have. The impression about them as a normal public is very different from what they actually are. And I'm hoping that maybe we can help them evolve a code of conduct, and they seem very, very receptive. So that was one. We went to another campus. Yesterday we had a session with our lawyers, because right down from the junior most associate level, we want this conversation to sort of take root at a deep level. We are there with you today. This evening we are talking to my fraternity, including all my competition and other senior members of the profession. And there are some people are flying down from Delhi and Chennai and all over the place to sort of hear this conversation. Tomorrow we are talking to the cricket board as well, then media, and then we culminate with a session tomorrow evening with civil society broadly, which has doctors, engineers, architects, judges, former judges, you sort of name it, as a sort of a melting pot of society where you can create a common denominator of the ethics conversation. So my analogy for this is that first, India has a long spiritual tradition of which understands basic concepts. Of course, the ethics conversation is a little different, but the ground is fertile, and I can see India is like a very dry forest which requires somebody to light the match. And if we can light the match ultimately it comes down to individuals taking leadership. No great conversation happens with setting up a whole organization, and you first start the movement and then you create the organization. So I'm in my own little way, I'm hoping that we can begin the conversation. Following this, we will be collaborating more. I'm going to have many conversations with you for how we can help in embedding this. We'll certainly look at your course curriculum, and we're going to take it to corporates and others as well. So this is a bit of a personal passion for my wife and I, and we're actually finding it very exciting, because it's the kind of emotional satisfaction that this gives in terms of doing something like this is immense and enormous. So I'll stop there, and we should now take time for our main speaker, Simon, and he's, while the formal introduction can be done, he is, if I can give my sort of personal take on him, is he takes very complex propositions and reduces them to very simple ideas which can be implemented. So I don't think it's very, whatever I've heard, and I'm hearing him now, this will be my 5th or 6th time I'm hearing him. He is very unpretentious, very practical, and that's why the book is actually for everyday ethics. It is not only for philosophers sitting in their ivory tower, but it is for people like you and me who on an everyday basis have to implement this. So I think you should benefit from, truly benefit from this. In any society, this is the starting point. Actually, the starting point is schools. We will take it there as well. But this is almost the starting point of getting this conversation going in India. So thank you very much, and may I request?
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me to join you today. Dr. Shahani, it's an immense privilege to be here. I've just had a small opportunity to look at this campus and the wonderful facilities. You must feel very fortunate to be studying here in such a place. But what I particularly love about it, and I'm sure this is along with everyone who visits, is the way that you integrated management, governance, but particularly with the creative side of things, with design in all of its different facets, and of course innovation. It's such an impressive thing to see. So congratulations. I'm sure this is a dream of yours which is coming true before you after all these decades of work that you've given, but honestly it's wonderful. And I'd also like to thank Mr. Shirul Shroff and his wife Vandana Shroff for their hospitality in inviting me to join them in India this time. I first came to India about 40 years ago. This is my 11th visit, maybe slightly longer. And I honestly say that if I wasn't happily living in Australia, this is where I would choose to live. I just love it as a place to come. I love the people. Every sense that you have is engaged when you come to India. So it's just such a great thrill that we found each other really at a conference of boring lawyers in Sydney, and now look what's happening. What I want to ask you, and I won't actually ask you this because it may take too long, but if I ask you to think about what is the most powerful force on this planet, what would come to mind? You might just reflect for a moment. What do you think is the most powerful force on Earth? Now, what I want to propose to you as the answer is that it is human choice. Humans, limited only by the laws of physics, shape this planet every day. Our choices produce things which are beautiful and useful, such as we were seeing up in the design lab areas. They also produce things which are quite terrible. I took my 18-year-old son one day to Dachau, just outside of Munich, to the concentration camp where the Germans experimented with all of their technological brilliance to create a killing machine for other human beings. And you can see it there. And there is absolute precision in the design and in the execution of that machine, even to the point where they screw hooks into a wooden beam at perfectly symmetrical points, merely to be able to hang their victims before they burn their bodies. That is as much a product of human choice as are the pyramids, or the temples of India, or the Bhagavad Gita, or any of the other things we make. And what people are slowly starting to understand is that the key to understanding the structure of human choice and how best to give it effect in the world does not lie in legislation or regulation or surveillance. It lies in understanding the basic structure of ethics. Because when people hear the word ethics all over the world, whatever language it happens to be translated into, they often think that it's about codes or rules or ways of constraining what we do, when in fact it's about understanding the basic structure, the DNA, by which the world comes to be made. Not always with grand acts of heroism, sometimes just by the multiplicity of decisions that are made, millions at a time, which will shape a market, which will move politics, which will completely alter the nature of the conditions in which we operate. And you, all of you, are learning through the course of your studies about how to understand and how to manage those forces. Because if you can understand that basic structure, then you unlock the way the universe operates through our choices to shape this world. So what I want to do is talk a little bit about that structure. Now you come from a tradition in this country, thousands of years of wisdom and reflection about the meaning of life, the place that we exercise within it. What I want to do is take something a little bit more abstract, but practical, which is introduce you to a universal framework by which all human choice is shaped. You might think that's a very large claim to say that there is something which is universal in its application, but my job today is to try and convince you that whichever culture you go to, irrespective of culture, location or time, the same basic structure is always at work. And once you understand that, then you get a sense of a handle of how you will use it, hopefully, for good. So the basic structure of ethics begins here and in ancient Greece and others, which, at least in the Western tradition, with a single question, which is posed by Socrates. At least Plato ascribes this to Socrates. And what he asks is, what ought one to do? So there are branches of philosophy that deal with the nature of existence, or beauty, or truth, all of which are theoretical questions which you can in fact debate for millennia. But the question in ethics is the practical question of philosophy. What ought one do? And as I said to the Maharashtra police the other day, just imagine that there is a fire in a house across the road from where you live. There are 2 children trapped in this house. You do not respond to that situation by saying, how fascinating, let's convene a symposium and discuss this for a week or so, because life doesn't let you do that. It presses in, there's an immediacy to it. But even more importantly, perhaps, in terms of its practicality, if you decide that you ought to rescue the children, then you don't finish that conversation by saying, wasn't that interesting, let's go in and have a drink or go to the cinema or whatever. You are now bound to act. What I want to do, if it is that you ought to rescue the children, then you must do it. So that's if you imagine a doorway, and across the top there's a lintel, and carved into the stone of that lintel is that question. What ought one to do? Well then, how do you begin to answer it? Well, I don't know whether when you studied at school with your mathematics you did geometry, but if you did, you would almost have certainly learnt that there are axioms in geometry, things which are self-evidently true that require no further proof. For example, that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, is one of the axioms of geometry. There is only one axiom in ethics, but it has the same self-evident power to it. And that axiom is that if you give any human being an unconstrained choice, they will always choose that which they think is good or better. This is precisely how markets work. If you have apples on a counter and oranges, and somebody walks up, you will watch them. There's no gun at their head, there's no hand guiding theirs. They pick up an apple, and you say, aha. They think this is better than the orange. They think this is good. We may not know why they think this. It could be to do with its taste. It could be the colour is attractive. It could be that it's about health benefits. It could be simply that there's an emotional connection because they used to eat apples with grandma or grandpa sitting on a veranda. Whatever the reason is, we know though that when they make that selection, it's because they think it is good. And we all did it this morning. I chose this tie, looking at others that I might have chosen, but that would be good or better for this particular occasion. You made choices based on this same thing. Well, that question about then what is it that you are going to choose is good becomes the top of the second pillar, holding up this beam. And on it is written the simple question, what is good? And the label for those things that are good is called values. So when the Dean puts up a list of values for this institution, she is saying to the world at large, these are the things that we say are good. These are the things that will guide our choices. And from that moment onwards, you can watch and see how those choices are exercised. Now that category, called values, what is good, that is fixed, but what changes is its content. And that's where different cultures and different times will order the things they say to be good in different ways. So in the United States of America, You ask them what is good, and they list their values, and they rank them in order of priority. Notionally, number one is liberty. The Americans will tell you, we are the land of the free. You can come here and you can burn our flag. You can dance in the ashes. We won't like it, but you can do that because we believe in liberty. But go to China and ask them to list their values, and they will have a list in which liberty is included, but it's not number one. For the Chinese, order or harmony takes greater priority, and so they will say, of course we believe in freedom, but not at the cost of our whole society being turned upside down. And yet 2 days after the 9/11 attacks, if you'd gone back to America and asked them to list their values, do they still have liberty at the top? No. It's supplanted, it goes down, it's replaced by security. And to this day, the country which claims to be the land of liberty has suspended habeas corpus, that old British privilege to be presented before the courts. They've built barriers. They have hectic tests, anything to control the flow of people, not because the world changed, but because the values changed in terms of their priority. So if you're in a company, you want to know, what does it say that is good? How are those values arranged? What will it do when it has conflict? Because that's the only way you can internalise an understanding of the choice. Now, it's not enough to know what is good. And too often, you'll see this in the structure. An organisation will list its values, but it has nothing else. This lintel I described is left at the moment standing on one post. And you can see that it is inherently unstable. There needs to be a second post. I'll just demonstrate why. Let's suppose I told you that one of my values was success. Remember, they're not all things like love and peace, success, profit. Things like that can be values too. So I tell you one of my values is success. You say, well, what does that look like? And I say, well, it's pretty clear for me. I'm going to win a gold medal in the next Summer Olympic Games. Now, if I told you that, you would look at me with this body and you'd say, you have got to be joking. There is no way known you are going to win a gold medal in any sport. You're not going to win it in shooting. You're not even going to win it in lying down shooting. This is simply not possible. And I say, oh yes I am, because I'm going to take performance enhancing drugs, or I'm going to cheat my way to victory. And you will say, yes, we know that it is good that you want to achieve this medal, but it is not right that you do it by those means. And that's the second pillar. It has carved into the top what is right. And from that emerge principles. And principles do different work to values. What they do is they tell you how to get the things that are good. And I'll give you 3 of them from history. First of all, the Chinese principle. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It first appears in the writing of Confucius. It's actually in his first original form, don't do to others what you wouldn't have done to you. Here's an American principle. Only do those things you'd be proud to see in the full light of day. Imagine the decision you're about to make is going to be broadcast through social media, broadcast media, print. Every single detail of what you propose to do will be made public. Would you be proud? And if you're not, the principle says, don't do it. Or I'll give you a 13th century European one from St. Thomas Aquinas. Always act according to a well-informed conscience. If your conscience would be offended, don't do it. Now these principles never by themselves are sufficient. Do unto others as you would have done unto you tells you nothing about what you'd have done to you. Only do those things you'd be proud to see on the front page tells you nothing about what you would be proud to see. Only do those things which accord with your conscience tells you nothing about what a particular conscience must decide. But it's that combination of values and principles that then gives you the structure for choice. And it is like DNA. If it mutates, then the world changes. So imagine 2 companies. One company here believes in trust, and this one believes in cunning. They will make different choices. This one has the principle of do unto others as you would have them do unto you. This one operates on the principle of do unto others before they do it to you. They will make different choices. Now, the reason why this is becoming so important for your world is that we have spent decades, certainly so in my country and in the United States and in others, trying to manage the risk of poor decisions being made by people by using rules and regulations. And it has failed. It has failed. And the reason it has failed and will continue to fail is because strategic risk is no longer located with CEOs like Cyril Shroff, or the Prime Minister of India, or the Chief Minister of Maharashtra, or whoever heads up today, Tata and Sons. That's not where strategic risk lies. It used to be that these people would control the affairs of a company. And as I was talking the other day with the police force about, today you can have a person in a call centre, most recent recruit, and they can simply lose control while this is being recorded, or someone in a retail outlet who just does something inappropriate and suddenly it's being filmed on a camera phone. It's being uploaded. It's now being viral in social media. And what seemed to be a minor activity by a person with no real status in the firm is suddenly echoing through the CEO's office or the President's office or the Prime Minister's. People of very low rank or seniority in a hierarchy can now generate strategic effects, and you cannot manage that by rules and regulations alone. In fact, the attempt to do that increases the systemic risk of the whole. Why? Well, let's imagine I attempt to create a system of regulations and surveillance so comprehensive that no one can choose to do anything wrong. What's the effect of that? Well, if I succeed, I create a world in which no one can choose to do anything right. No one chooses. All they do is comply. They tick the box. And the capacity to make responsible decisions is progressively lost because no one actually practices it. Even the world's greatest tennis player will lose their capacity to hit the tennis ball at its peak form if they never practice. And that's what we tend to do. It's an analogy I've talked to Cyril about. Let's suppose India decides to be the straightest standing nation on earth. So how does India decide to do this? It gets every single citizen and puts them in a plaster cast. From their neck to their toes. There's the Indian nation standing perfectly straight. Wonderful, it seems. Goal achieved. But inside the plaster cast, the muscles are withering away. And if there's the slightest crack, people will fall over like the sacks of jelly they have become. Mistake ho gaya. Bad decision. What you need instead to do is to create a framework where people practice making responsible choices. They develop a sense of the purposes which they are trying to serve. They're informed by values and principles which provide an internal compass by which they then are guided on a day-to-day basis. And then, without having to be heroic, through the practice of everyday ethics, responsible, thoughtful decision-making, supported by people like you with your education and commitment, you progressively make for the better world. And there is no reason that making a better world is reserved exclusively for not-for-profits or for governments. Business has its role to play too, by serving genuine human needs. And the fact that business profits from doing it is fine, providing that those needs are adequately met with a strong ethical foundation. So I'm sure what I've been talking about merely resonates or echoes with the kind of material that you've already been engaging with, particularly those of you in the postgraduate stream where you've been thinking about this. What I do encourage you to do, though, is reflect more on, think about who you're going to work for. Think about how your values and principles will intersect with those of the companies you might join. And particularly think about how you will manage people and the most powerful force on earth, human choice, by means other than the ineffective tool of regulation and surveillance alone. Thank you.
In our colleges. Let me introduce both of them. First is Professor Amaya Amolkar. Amaya has been a faculty with us. He then suddenly got this entire thing about doing social entrepreneurship, started an amazing project of training teachers in English in municipal schools and in government schools outside in the villages, in the rural areas. And his NGO is doing very well. He'll tell you later about it when he joins us for lunch. And then now he is taking charge of completely of the, we have a one-year program which is MBE, Management, Business and Entrepreneurship, and Amaya actually anchors that entire program, and the MAC, which is Media, Advertising and Communication. We have another young professor here, Aditya Kashyap, and he's a young economist, but I can tell you that I've had the largest number of discussions with him on ethics for so many years. Next time I get something like this, Cyril, I'm going to just send them to you and say, handle this for me. But I think what's very interesting is that we do find a large number of students who come up to us and do tell us that we don't think that this is ethical, and at least they are thinking about it and they come up and they can feel free to come up and talk to us. So both of them are actually going to spearhead this entire question answer session. They know their students very well. But before that, I think the only person from, I can now see even another faculty from design school, but the very first faculty from design school who wrote to me saying that she does not come on a Monday, but she's especially going to be coming in because it's been her, this has been something that she's struggling for last many years, because she was studying Vedanta and she finds there is a struggle between Dharma and Karma, right? That's what she said. And since today it's her birthday, let's give her the first birthday.
Thank you for that very, very enriching talk. I in fact read the PDF and I think I read it twice because it was so beautifully simplified. My question is, do you think that, what is your view on the relationship between freedom and responsibility? And do you think that ethics is closer to our concept of freedom or closer to our concept of responsibility?
So both of them are intimately connected, and that's why I think it goes back to the Dharma-Karma debate as well. The only way that you can actually hold a person being culpable, that is, capable of carrying blame for the things that they have done, is if they were capable of doing something other than what they did. In other words, responsibility is intrinsically linked to the notion of freedom. And as I explore in the paper you read, I think it's a distinguishing aspect of our form of being, human being, that we are not simply bound by instinct or desire to operate as, say, an animal might do, where you can't really say, well, the ant is to blame for what it does, any more than the lion is to blame for killing the impala, or the tiger, the deer. It's something which it does because this is of its nature. Whereas we possess a form of being, mysterious, for maybe quite mysterious reasons, but nonetheless we do, in which we are not limited by those aspects of our being. We do, of course, have instincts, and we do all have desires, but there are moments where we say, no, I won't do it, or yes, I will do something, simply because I made a promise, even though it may be in good circumstances where it would be easier simply to turn away. So freedom and responsibility must be joined together. So if you imagine it in terms of some kind of karma involving a cosmic calculator, there's no way they could ever ascribe blame to you for the things you do if you had no choice at all. It would become a perverse system, and Dharma wouldn't allow that. There must be that capacity for freedom. Now, some people object to that. There will be people, for example, who go to the physical sciences and say free will is an illusion, that it's simply a matter of predestination and cause and effect. But we now know that even in the physical sciences that is not true. If anybody here has studied quantum mechanics, quantum physics, you'll know that there's a radical, that is fundamental degree of indeterminacy when you've got the waveforms for probability, which only become collapsed or real because of an observer looks in it. And so you can have superposition in the quantum world. So Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, you can only know either the position or the momentum of the subatomic particle, not both, because you're merely looking at it will disturb it. So I think even in the physical sciences, we've got to a point now where we have to question this. And they're now starting to question even the functional MRI studies, where they, for a while, thought that perhaps your brain had reached a decision point prior to the actual decision. That research is being re-evaluated again. So both on ethical grounds, to do with the injustice of punishing a person for a thing they could never have chosen to do differently, or in relation to the physical sciences, or in relation to the way we might think of the type of being in which we participate, all of that says we should not be opposing freedom and responsibility, but keeping them specifically joined as essential to each component.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom on ethics. So we have some of our students who want to know about decisions which you have made when it comes to your career choices. You have Shiv wanting to know about your career choice in ethics.
Good afternoon, sir. I just
Hi.
want to know, what made you choose ethics as an area of study and as a career choice?
Well, the truthful answer is I'm not entirely sure. No, I'll explain. So my mother died when I was 7 years of age, and she died because she was a very deeply committed Roman Catholic Christian who fell pregnant with a fourth child. And she went to the doctor, and the doctor said to her, if you continue with this pregnancy, you will certainly die, and the child will probably die as well. But because, I don't know if any of you know about some certain Christian beliefs, but they believe that the child is a soul and it must be baptised, otherwise it suffers eternal damnation. It's not something I believe, but that's what she believed. And so she came home from the doctor, and she had no one to talk to. She didn't want to talk to a priest. She just didn't know who to talk to. And so she wrote a letter to her sister, Anne, in which she says, I've just been told these things, and I don't know what to do, because if I carry on with the pregnancy, I'll leave behind my husband Robert, who she loved, and 3 children. I was the oldest of those 3 children. But then this baby must be born. Anyway, I had no idea this letter had been written until when I was about 37 years of age and already doing this job. I visited an aunt of mine, a different aunt. He said, I have something to show you. And she went away. She was a nun, so my mother's family were quite religious. And she brought back this letter, and she said, I think you should see this. And that was because in the time since when she wrote the letter, without my knowing it, I had created an organisation where she could come. Now, the only clue I've got about that is that at the end of that letter, she writes of me standing next to her as a little boy, I would have been 5, colouring in. And I don't know what happened. Maybe my mother said something to me. Or maybe I sensed, as a child might sense from the mother, a sense of this anguish that she was experiencing. But without knowing it, that is where I found myself. What happened was she did continue with the pregnancy. A year and a day later she died. And my brother, Angus, he lived. And he's in France today. Now that's the how did I get to be interested in philosophy. I think you probably, you may have all had experiences of loss and grief in your own families, it makes you think, why? How can this happen to me? What could explain this? Is it fair or not? As to how I actually then came to do this work, I finished school when I was 16, and I had no money. My father, I'd gone to boarding school because of what had happened, and my father said, now you're on your own, I've given you an education. If you want anything else in your life, you have to pay for it yourself. So my first job was as a cleaner up on a manganese mine on the Good Island, right in the north of Australia, in the monsoonal area. And I ended up doing that for a period of time. I was enriched by working. I still wear, the boots I wear, these are called Blumston boots. No matter where I am, what clothes I wear, even a dinner suit, I wear working boots to remind me of where I started, because it keeps me grounded. And then I worked on... I studied law. Unfortunately, Syria, I found that law was too remote from any notion of justice for me. So, all the lawyers, recovering lawyers have to deal with that. I went to Tasmania, and then I went, this is how shallow I am, I have to confess. The first place I ever came to travelling was India. And then I thought, I must go to Europe, what will I do? So I thought, maybe I should stay there longer than just a holiday. Why don't I do a master's degree? Oh, well, where will I go? I only knew of two universities in England, Cambridge and Oxford. So I went to Cambridge. I'd love to say it was more serious than that, but I ended up there. My choice of college, Magdalen College, I chose that because it had the longest riverfront on the Cam. It wasn't anything more serious than that. But once I got there, then that really refined me. So my philosophical inclinations, it was like going into a crucible. The first word my supervisor said to me when I arrived, he said, there's only one rule here, go for the jugular. It was incredibly aggressive intellectual combat, and you should never learn to do it. Because I had to forget it. It's the enemy of good philosophy. It's not about proving yourself right. That's not what philosophy should be. Philosophy is about inquiring to find the truth, to find understanding and put it together. Just being the smartest bloke in the room, and I'm pretty good at it, that's not what it's about. And I had to unlearn all of that. So, I'm sorry it's such a long answer to your simple question, but it may give you some understanding of how I came to be doing what I'm doing.
I'd just like to say that, when you talk about shoes, now one of my students here, I don't know if he's around, has created vegan shoes from vegetable leather. And I think next time that you buy a pair, we'll give you that pair of shoes so that will even keep you more grounded.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for considering us worthy of knowing that personal story. The next question actually revolves around the center of ethics by Desha.
Good afternoon. I would actually want to know at your ethics center, how you helped a client face an ethical dilemma.
So we get two types.
That question of maybe how do you help society, Australian society in general? How are you working?
Yeah, so we have a range of different clients who come to us. There are individuals, like my mother would have been, and people who, for example, have to decide whether to continue with medical treatment or not, end-of-life decisions. And then we have companies, then we have government ministers, and then we have other institutions. So our task is always to support others to make decisions for themselves. We're not a moral policeman, we are not the judge of what is right and wrong. We are an enabler of others to make good decisions, by which we mean we help them to clarify their own values and principles, become clear about their own purpose, and then to have the understanding to be able to give effect to that. Now sometimes these are matters which touch the whole nation. So do any of you follow cricket?
Yes.
Right. Did any of you notice what happened last year in Australia with ball tampering?
Yes.
Okay. So that caused national shame. There were people who were literally in tears, grown men, crying at the sense that our country had become the kind of place that would cheat at cricket. And there would have been a slow process where that would happen. Now, there are some countries where people do that, they don't care. Australia did. And so I was asked by the Board of Cricket Australia to do a review of Australian cricket, to look at its underlying culture and what have been the causes of this corruption of the game, that it caused so much shame across the nation. And there again, our job was not to benchmark cricket against another sport or against another countries, but we asked only one question. If you say that you believe in these things, how much of that is true? So the only test that matters is really how much you are like the thing that you say that you claim to be. And they've got some very good tools we've developed for managing that. Because if ever there's a gap between what you say you stand for and what you actually do, then people all around you say, well, they don't believe it, why should I? And they become cynical, and then they start to do their own thing. So our work ranges from the individual who needs guidance to find a clearer view of how to live their lives in accordance with their values and principles, right through corporate space, up to whole society where it's wrestling with issues where perhaps there's been ethical failure. And what I hope to do is to support that capacity being developed through Cyril's initiative, because there's absolutely no reason why India, in a different way, it will be its own way, shouldn't be providing that resource so that a corporation here or a government within India or individuals shouldn't be able to get exactly the same support to navigate the complex ethical landscape which we all have to cover.
I'm going to make a recommendation. Everybody will want to come and work for my center, please do.
I think we're going to create one over here also with you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Longstaff. Just talking about ethics again, coming from an individualistic perspective, and we were just reading up about how ethics becomes an internal policeman, and it's deep-rooted within us. So in that context, there is something to do with personal. So it's me as an individual, and where is the origin of ethics as a human existence? So on that context, I had one of our students, Shreya Srivastava, to ask you a question.
Good afternoon, sir. So I would like to know that as an individual, how do we deal with situations of conflicting personal and professional values? What will be your opinion on that?
Thank you. Just before I answer, I should also compliment your professor on being an economist. As he would know, the origin of that dismal science lies not with economists, but with a moral philosopher called Adam Smith. And you should know, the invisible hand. Look, you ask a really important question, particularly in this modern age. I think that the ecology of business, for example, whether it's a corporation or a professional services firm, that ecology is radically changing right now, where no longer do you distinguish yourself in the marketplace by what you do, but instead by what you mean, what you stand for. And in order for that to work, and the reason for that, of course, just to come back a step, is innovation is so fast now that if a bank creates a new product or service, their competitors can do it like that. So no one's going to win on competing on what you do. So it's necessary now to be able to compete to attract capital, talented staff, customers, and a supply chain that all reinforce what you stand for. Because any one of those parts, if they're out of order, can bring down the whole house. So for companies, or professional services firm, what they need to start doing, this goes back to your world actually, when you prefer the HR world, you have to actually no longer just be able to recruit people who will obey your rules. You need to find people whose personal values and principles are not identical, but are at least in accordance with that of the company. And the company itself then has not only to recruit you for that match, you need to make a selection. And if you find a company, and this ecology will give you choices, which does have an alignment, then the chances are that it will be relatively rare that there'll be a conflict between what you're asked to do professionally and what you would do personally. Now, it may still happen that that is the case. And if you do encounter that, then there's two possibilities. One is that the company allows for a form of selective conscientious objection, where they say, we still value you as an employee, we still see you have an alignment, but in this particular matter, we excuse you. So the classic case might be a lawyer or somebody in marketing not wanting to work on tobacco. They say, I just don't want to sell tobacco to children, you know, it can't be used to any degree without causing harm, I don't want to do that. And hopefully your friend would say, okay, I understand that for you, therefore you do something else because we value you. But if you're unlucky enough then to have someone insist that you do it, then you may have to make that choice as to whether or not you accept in your own eyes the blame that would come from violating your own conscience. And you may say, I can't afford to leave. I don't want my career to be blighted. I don't want to have my CV showing short time. I can't afford to lose the income. But at least you will be honest with yourself that what you chose to do was make that decision and that it was wrong. And there are some times when people will feel it necessary to do what is wrong. Now what I hope is that that incident is smaller. And the best thing to help protect you is through places like this university institute, soon to be university, that you will develop a board for life. Those people sitting with you will know who you are, what you stand for, and they will support you when it comes to those difficult decisions. As we look at
Firstly, it was an absolute privilege to hear you about your values and the principal system and how do they correlate. My question was in lines of culture. What role do you think culture plays into the foundation of ethics? Because that is something that I think you also covered.
Thank you. So, in my view, it's actually slightly the other way around. I think culture is the artifact which is produced out of ethics. So these choices we make, the values and principles that lie at the very bottom of this, will produce cultural artefacts, which will be ways of behaving, physical objects, artefacts that become part of a culture, certain patterns and institutions. And the trouble is when those cultural components lose touch with their foundations. So you can use, if I stick with the architectural analogy, imagine the foundations of a building which are laid down, and then you start to create more and more on top of it. What often happens in a society is that the exterior walls and the windows and the flying buttresses and the domes and all the rest, they become sources of endless fascination. People look at them, they repair them, but no one looks at the foundations. And slowly they crumble away from neglect. Now, those buildings will still stand strong and true when there is no change. As long as the ground is stable, they're fine. But once you begin to introduce a shaking of the ground, the kind of change that we're all experiencing now, if the foundations have gone, then they fall. And we're seeing this all around the world, where institutions are betraying their fundamental purposes, not honouring their values and principles, and the culture becomes corrupted. And it just happens a little bit at a time. So there's this process by which a kind of dissonance is allowed, and it slowly builds by turning a blind eye here. Something's allowed there. It's called the normalisation of deviance. It doesn't happen in big pieces, it's little bits. So managers, executives, they have to watch very carefully to see that their culture is not actually like a cancer. It's becoming corrupted or changed. So I'd go back, I'd turn the question as you posed to the other way around, and I'd always go back to ensure that those foundations are strong, and then the culture will reflect that.
So, I'm just going to muck in here. Your book, the first chapter of your book, you've given a couple of instances about ethics in everyday life, and one of them was if your grandmother gives you a cardigan which is horrific and you don't want horrendous and you don't want to be seen dead in that. But would you wear it and would you tell your grandmother that, oh, this is very nice, or would you not say? Now, the entire class, when I asked them that, put up their hands to say they'll wear that and they will go to their grandmother and tell them that it's the best thing that she's done. Right? Isn't that a yes. Now, isn't this here? Well, this is where, again, I would say I would want to please my grandmother. She's too precious for me and my cardigan is not.
Yeah.
So, this is where culture comes in, right?
Yeah, it does. And
it's our value system that we've been brought up with respecting our grandparents. Maybe a German would stand up and say, hey, grandmom, this is not the right thing we should have done. But I don't think any of us would do it. I don't want my granddaughter definitely to do it.
but the culture will, of course, condition some of those things. But the risks I was pointing to in that chapter is where culture becomes just dead and lifeless. And where people merely do this, not because they love their grandmother, because that's just the thing to do. And you'll find wherever you go in the world where there's been some kind of ethical failure, and ask people, why did you do it? I say, well, I didn't see it at the time. Why did you not see it? Well, because that's just what we do. Everybody does it like that. And that's where you get this corrosive effect. But the other point I was trying to make at that point is that there are some times when you will actually be genuinely pulled in the opposite direction, where it's such a serious matter as to what you say or not. And I want people to understand that in ethics, if you're living this examined life, you cannot hope for perfect clarity or certainty. I'd love to say that there is a religion or a philosophy or a form of practice that provides the right answer in every single occasion. No such thing exists. And this is what it means to be human. We have this ability to make choices, and yet, why is it? I don't know why, but we have to do so sometimes in conditions of radical uncertainty, where we must still decide. Your grandmother doesn't go away, she's still there. Darling, what do you think? And you cannot escape the reality, yet you may be, in the case of that or other things, in a genuine dilemma. So I'm very pleased to know, though, that if ever I was to give any of you a gift, and it's absolutely atrocious, you're very unlikely to let me know.
Are you the grandfather?
Possibly. What would you do, sir?
I would do the same.
Okay. One of the interesting things on that question, though, is we were talking a bit about this yesterday at the law firm annual day, about this notion of inflection points. Sometimes when you seem to have an absolutely impossible choice, then what you need to do is to be really creative. So, very ethical. I've used this analogy with a few people. A lot of people think, oh, ethical is the good guys always finish last. You know, that this is a route to being unsuccessful, so you've got to be hard and unethical. And they think of ethics as being like a little rabbit, you know, people pat you and say, well, isn't it nice, you know, lovely soft honey, and here's a big truck called reality coming down the road, and you're destined to be roadkill. That is not what the ethical life is. It's about being nimble and creative. And the example I've given of this from a business context, just to show you this, how you reconcile these apparently impossible situations, involved, this is a true story, a building company that had been going for 30 years. And it was really well regarded because of its integrity, because it would always finish work on time and on budget. And then their competitors were coming in and undercutting them, saying, well, we can do it, you know, don't worry about these people, half the time, half the price. And so the client will say, well, that's a better deal, cheaper, quicker, I'll take it. Well, it was never done on time, never done on budget. And so the honest builder is losing market share going backwards. And they say, I've got this dilemma, a bit like Grandma and the jumper. On the one hand, I can maintain my reputation for integrity, but my business will close, and people will lose their jobs. Or I can join these people and become like a rat in the pack, and at least I'll live to fight another day. Now, so often in business, people say, that's my choice. If I don't do this, I don't survive. And that's just lazy thinking. Because there are creative alternatives which you create if you are an ethically engaged individual. And in this case, when we spoke, we said, well, if you've got 30 years of accurate estimation, put your money where your mouth is. What does that mean? Well, go to a client and offer them a bond. 10% of the contract price which you are willing to forfeit if you overrun on cost of time. Why would I do that? I mean, why would I possibly put a bond down? Because all you need to do is to ask your clients to require the same of your competitors, and in the instant they do that, the table tilts. Because an unscrupulous competitor will never, ever offer a deal where they're bound to lose their money. So you don't just have to be there stuck. Sometimes you will be. At other times you've got to reconfigure the nature of the world by changing the terms under which you're prepared to engage. That's ethics. It's not being the rabbit. It's being the smart, agile person engaged in shaping their environment so that you can have your ethical cake and eat it.
So we have one student of ours who planned to join her family business. She's struggling with the situation here, so I thought this would be an ideal platform to come up with a creative solution for her question. Yeah, Sybil from MBE.
Hello, sir. It's a real pleasure listening to you. I personally do agree with what you just said earlier about philosophy should not be about being the smart person in the room, but about introspecting your own life and way of thinking. What I'm currently dealing with is a situation where I will join my family business eventually after I finish this course. And I see that there are a lot of employees that because of our new ideas and the expansion that we're planning, will have to be laid off. And it is a sensitive issue. Since we are a family business, there is loyalty, there is trust. So would it be fair to choose performance over loyalty? And what do you think about it?
It's a great question, because I can promise you every single business in this world is about to be transformed by artificial intelligence, robotics, biotech. And in Australia, they're predicting that in 10 years, 50% of the people in banking will not be working there. They'll be replaced. Law, 40% decline, particularly junior roles that are just doing things like discovery. So this is going to be a common problem. You name it, it'll be there. The question is not so much whether or not you embrace the new technology and allow for the change in the composition of the workforce, but whether or not you recognise that there is going to be a transition period and make a choice as to whether that transition period will be just and orderly or chaotic and unjust or unfair. No one is guaranteed for life a job anywhere, but what you can reasonably expect is that if you are in employment, you'll be given fair warning about the change, and that you will be given what support the business can actually afford to provide, better to equip you for the new future. New skills, new opportunities, as it may be. So people, I think, in the design area are going to have an absolutely wonderful time, because the marketplace is going to soon allow for the mass production of basic goods through things like molecular printing and other things that they can 3D printing, additive manufacturing, where things can be produced for virtually nothing eventually, in about 30 years' time, in mass numbers. What will people want then? They will want to have something which is unique, something that bears the mark of a human being. It'll be the design that comes from the designers, or it might be something which has had an individual human component. So, will there be an opportunity for employees to make that transition? Yes. Will it be an opportunity for everybody? I don't think so. I actually think that our societies are going to have to start to rethink where meaning and purpose comes and how the economy operates. Now, we've done this before. There have been societies in the past where people have had rich and meaningful lives without being employed. Ancient Athens, indigenous society in Australia prior to colonisation, probably a number of examples here in India. By having smaller scale, so I predict there'll be changes to the urban environments where communities will become smaller. You'll find people who, for example, in the city like Sydney, instead of coming home and getting Uber Eats to bring you a meal, there'll be somebody in your street who will have cooked your dinner using local produce grown in your suburb. And this will be a new kind of economy. We'll probably see new taxation of the means of production, so taxes on robots or possibly forms of universal basic income based on this concept of the universal commons, that there are certain goods that we all provide to those in commerce which they don't pay for at the moment. But that's all a larger policy issue sometimes than your family business. What you can afford to do is ask that question. What will the transition be? Will we make it just and orderly? Not, will we stop it? Because you can't. Will we make it just and orderly?
Thank you.
Just on that note, just one last question in terms of talking about AI and robotics. We recently saw Mark Zuckerberg and Sundar Pichai sitting on the other side. And that is
With the advent of data. On that note, when it comes to social media and all of us being influencers or mildly influencers, I have Manan to ask you a question.
Right. So, good afternoon, sir. My question for you is, top companies of the world like Facebook and Google have been found guilty of unethical practices. Do you think in today's cutthroat competitive world, success and ethics go together?
Yes, I do. And we've already seen this. Google's had effectively strikes with its own employees who are undermining some of its productive capacity because of their perception of the reality in some cases of unethical conduct. What happens is, if you don't exercise self-restraint, as Google or Amazon or any of the others, then inevitably society intervenes and it imposes upon you restraint. So antitrust legislation is under contemplation in the United States to break up these big companies, just as they were broken up when it was big oil and big telcos. This is not a good thing for these businesses to do. So instead what you need to do is, I think, exercise the self-restraint and therefore avoid the deadweight costs that come from formal regulation, surveillance and other mechanisms which will be imposed on you. I think you can run great businesses too with a strong ethical core. It's not that you have to have the same ethics as everybody else. As I said, the ecology of business will be that there will be different organisations with different ethical systems competing for employees, capital and markets and all the rest. But you've got, the one thing you've got to do is whatever you say you are, let that be true. That's the one thing. And if you do that, you reduce internal costs and you don't have society impose on you. And in that sense, you can flourish.
I don't know if we ask one more questions. What we could do is email those questions to him and maybe give us. I know a lot of students have given the questions, sorry, but...
So my long answers.
No, your answers were absolutely perfect. But before I hand over to Cyril to do a conclusion, I have one last question for you.
It's the true one, is it?
No, this is not the cardigan one. This is, what is the biggest ethical dilemma that you have faced in your life and how did you resolve it?
It was to do with some advice I was giving to another organisation where I knew that there was a chance that they would cause considerable harm. And I knew the information based on confidential information, and one of the most important things about my work, personally and as an organisation, is to respect confidentiality so that you can be entirely trusted. And so I saw this very large corporation about to do something which would have caused considerable harm to people and had to wrestle with whether or not I would breach confidentiality in the public interest. And that potentially could have destroyed one aspect of the reputation, although it may have been right. As it happened, I resolved it by convincing the company not to do the thing that they were going to do, not because I appealed to their better self, but because I showed that ultimately it was not in their interest to do this, and in that sense it was reconciled. But for me, that's in a professional one. Personal ones, I'll be very personal. My father died 2 years ago, and he left me, in a folder he gave me, a series of papers, which some of them were just letters that I had written to him from various parts of the world and he'd written back. But he put in the middle of it basically a bombshell about his own past and his relationships with my stepmother. And I have had to decide whether to tell my brothers and sisters about this, because it would be like an explosion going off a bomb. And so far I've decided not to, because I think it would do more harm to relationships than any good that could possibly come from it. So I've sat on that information, knowing that it's there, just buried away in this folder of papers I've got. And that was and they know I've got something, because they're aware that there was something that my father left me. But that's the choice I've made.
Just fascinating. I think there's lots more that we can speak about. So I just also wanted to remind everybody about these books that I don't know whether they have enough copies, but we'll send more. We'll send more, and we send it in soft copy as well. It's got a lot of very useful thoughts. And there's also a book on ethics and design. So if you're in the design school, I think you'll find it particularly relevant of how do you marry design and ethics. And what is ethical design? I think this is very, very relevant. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, this is what we are dealing with, so very relevant. So I won't take up more time. Over to you.
Thank you so much. What an enriching morning this has been. I think